Sandra goes to visit her elderly father at his apartment. She exudes patience, coaching him to remember the key is in the doorknob and the door is in front of him. He finally gets the door unlocked and they hug before she guides him back to take a seat. Then she busies herself in the pantry. They catch up on themselves. Sandra has a daughter named Lynn. She lets on that she's also working a lot with commemorations starting soon. She's translating a Swiss German named Anne-Marie Schwarzenbach's letters. Anne-Marie is close with Klaus Mann, who's the son of Thomas Mann, Sandra's father's favorite writer. Sandra serves her father a snack and encourages him to keep his phone aside, despite his worry that he might not know when Layla calls. She promises the phone works fine because she'd called before coming. He gives in, and she helps feed him. Sandra picks Lynn up from school. Lynn eagerly tells her about her day. They had practiced a shooting drill in the case of a criminal attack. Sandra is at the park when she helps a boy with a stray ball. An adult calls out to the boy, "Jeremy," to be courteous to the nice lady, and Sandra turns towards the voice, seeing that it's Clément. He didn't recognize her because of the glasses, but still, it's clear that it has been a while. Sandra notes Jeremy has changed and grown. Clément has been away, far off at the North Pole. He remembers Anne-Marie's letters on Sandra's to-do list. Sandra had given him a book. She wants to hear about his time at the expedition, and he mildly complains that she never called. She defends, saying he's the one who left, so he should have been the one to call. He counters back that it wasn't a permanent goodbye, or a reason to not have called. During the commemorations, Sandra takes the stand and delivers the war experience through Anne-Marie's eyes. Afterwards, Sandra joins veterans on their tour guide, where she translates to those in need of it. When she's not working, she's at home bonding with her daughter. But they can't snuggle or read for long because Sandra has activities planned. She wants to take Lynn to see her great-grandmother because it's been long, and then they'll go see her grandfather. Lynn had been unenthusiastic about it initially, but was the most excited to see great-grandmother Jacqueline. Jacqueline divulges how difficult living life has become with her age. She complains that she's like an object that constantly needs repair and help. She needs a guide going down the stairs, and while she barely does go out, when she does, she gets stares from people because she's a wrinkled lady in a wheelchair. But people are nice, mostly out of pity. Jacqueline doesn't care for pity. She doesn't want it because she's very much a living person, and that's all people need to see. Sandra and Lynn visit Granddad next. Lynn makes a painting for him while Sandra dots around, chatting along. He likes having Layla around, although it's been a while since she last stopped by. He understands that she has obligations, and Sandra assures him that Layla loves him. Sandra and Lynn are outdoors on a bridge when Sandra gets a call that she knows is from her father. She decides she'll pick up much later, more interested in tasting Lynn's ice cream and making a run for it. Sandra goes to see Françoise. She's a bag full of bad news, starting from Sandra's father needing to be relocated to a home. A private nursing home is out of the family's budget, regardless of sentimental reasons. Françoise lets on that public homes have a long waiting list because a patient would have to pass on before they can be replaced with a new patient. On the other hand, private homes have a shorter waiting list. She suggests they start thinking fast and sell Sandra's father's apartment to afford a private nursing home. Sandra is worried about his books. Françoise proposes they're sold or thrown away. This appalls Sandra, but Françoise's hands are tied. She already has more books than she needs. Sandra meets up with Clément at a restaurant where he recounts his adventures on his expedition. He and his sailmates encounter a sea leopard, but Sandra believes it's a wild tale. He promises her it's true. They take a stroll, and their conversation reveals a lot. Clément is married, but Valerie, his wife, isn't too fond of his constant traveling. They've been together for 10 years, but those years have come with a distance between the two. Clément can't answer if they're still in love, because a part of him wonders if they ever were. Sandra recalls she's only met Valerie once, and Clément barely talks about her. As for Sandra, she's been widowed for 5 years now, and has stayed single since then, to Clément's disbelief. He asks if grief has held her back, but that's not the case. She just has different priorities, but Clément advises her that she's still young and shouldn't go acting immune to loving again. They bid themselves goodnight, and Sandra retires home, where she has a nightmare about a sea leopard. She has to shake it off and get to work. This time, she's a translator at a university. After the class, Sandra is heading home when a student calls her attention. She knows Sandra as Georg's daughter. She was a student of his and enjoyed his lectures. She asks him for his email so she can reach out to him, but Sandra offers hers instead, so she can relay the message to her father. She doesn't want to come out with it at first, but the student's curiosity makes her admit that her father is unwell and suffering from a disease. She starts to tear up and has to hurriedly leave. Sandra meets a full house at Georg's apartment. His doctor has made him understand that he needs to move out of the apartment because his health is failing and he needs more medical attention. Paramedics also show up and Françoise ushers them in, introducing herself as the ex-wife. Present is also Eliode and Layla, Georg's companion. Layla makes Georg aware that the paramedics are there to take him to the hospital. She promises she'll be there the whole time to provide the comfort that he needs. He can't use the stairs, so they've come with a wheelchair to assist. Sandra starts packing his bags. It's hard for her, and she breaks down crying. The whole family takes the ambulance to the hospital. Françoise engages them in conversation about her non-violent ecologist group that's not entirely legal with risks of jail time or a huge fine. At the ER, Sandra soothes her father. He asks about Layla, voicing he wouldn't want her to go through the same disease. Sandra assures him Layla will be fine. She's waiting for him next door, and she offers to get her. Sandra gets Layla, and then goes to a nearby cafe to inform the others that Georg is with Layla, and she needs to return home to her daughter. Françoise mentions how America has taken ER to the next level. They've reduced the load on hospitals by stationing ERs in places like the malls, small booths where nurses can attend to a patient. She and Michelle will hang around a little longer. Sandra and Eliode bid them goodbye. Sandra shows up at Clément's workplace, and he's happy to see her. He begins giving her a tour of the place, stating his station is for mostly brain work and sample test preparations. The extraterrestrial floor, as he calls it, is a small office that he shares with his colleague, Aurélie. They've worked together for 15 years. Aurélie nags about some last-minute adjustments she's constantly having to make concerning the MEB stabilization problem. She mentions she'll bring in the sample that night and cross-section the following day. She bids them goodnight, then takes her leave. Sandra likes Clément's place of work. It seems cozy and relaxing, but Clément addresses that there are days it can be otherwise. He wants to show her the mass spectrometer used for analyzing matter, and she agrees to the extra tour. He takes her to the room and explains how it works, mentioning that the meter is not the latest model, but it gets the work done. Sandra has to leave to attend Lynn's fencing class. She bids Clément goodbye, but stays rooted and stares at him. Next thing, she leans in and kisses him. They tease each other, Clément clarifying she's the one that made the first move no matter how much she denies it. Their high school bickering only leads to a more passionate kiss. Clément is eager to see her again soon, but Sandra is in the mood to play hard to get. Lynn isn't happy that Sandra arrived late. Sandra lies she had a delay in the subway and bribes her daughter with hugs and kisses. All hands on are deck back at Georg's apartment. They sort out his belongings, what should go, and what should probably be inherited. Sandra contacted Georg's former students concerning his books. She's decided to give them all out. Sandra invited Clément over for dinner. He comes bearing a gift for Lynn. It's a cardboard house, and he helps her assemble it. It has a light that's powered by solar energy, and she instructs her to put it by her window when the sun comes up. Sandra kisses Lynn goodnight and joins Clément in her room. They've only just started having fun when Lynn calls out that she's thirsty. Sandra resumes mommy duties, but she's eager to pick up from where she left off with Clément. She hesitates for a moment because it's been a while since she's last been with someone. Clément guides her, and when it's over, he can't fathom how she could have kept to herself for so long. Clément won't stay the night. Sandra senses sadness, but he clarifies, an affair is basically tough. Sandra goes to the hospital and finds Georg wandering. She guides him back to his room and asks him if the caregivers are nice to him. He answers that they are, and a nurse steps in to take his blood pressure. When the nurse leaves, Georg reveals he can't find his bearings. Sandra orients him on where he is, but it's more than that, deeper than that. He can't understand what's happening or no longer happening in his life. It's like a lackluster film with no suspense and nothing to anticipate. Clément visits Sandra again, and they go straight to business. He has only 2 hours to spare, but they're done in less time to talk about their budding relationship. The feelings have always been there. They've always been just friends, respecting both grief and marriage vows. But Clément has decided life is too short, so he must act on what he feels. Sandra holds him close, whispering and teasing he's taking the wild route, but Clément reminds her she pulled the first move. Sandra and her mother are back at the apartment, putting things in place. Sandra wants to keep her father's dictionaries and poems, but Françoise points out it's way more luggage than she initially said she wanted. Sandra finds a photo and shows Françoise, but her mother can't recall the memories attached to the photo. She admits that her professional life held more weight than her personal life. It's like a clean slate for her, coupled with the fact that Georg was a burden for her more than a lover. She claims she didn't walk away sooner for Sandra's sake. Georg has a tendency for self-harm, and Françoise wasn't looking for history to repeat itself. They get visitors. Georg's students are ready to inherit what's left of the shelf because Françoise can swear Sandra is hogging the best of the books. Lynn goes away to camp, and Sandra takes advantage of her freedom with Clément. They have sex, but he offers they can have more. Maybe go out or talk. She's fine keeping the attraction physical, but sitting in bed all day isn't his style. After a playful wrestle, they end up in a museum, and then in a park's maze playing hide and seek. They soon head back to her apartment, and Sandra admits she's grown attached, so much that it hurts to remember he has a wife to return home to. He replies that he's not happy about it either, and Sandra wants assurance that he's happy with her instead. He professes that he is. Leaving is a struggle, especially when Sandra starts pouting and enticing him. He steals one more passionate kiss before he has to go. Sandra goes to see her dad. He senses light in the bathroom, and Sandra is moved to check if he can see anything else. Most importantly, if he can see her. She quizzes him on what she's wearing and the length of her hair, but his answers are vague, and she knows his sight hasn't improved. He asks about her children, so she informs him that Lynn is still at camp, but will be back soon. They'll herd out to Normandy to honor Eloise's invitation, and this means that Sandra will be away from Georg for about 2 weeks. Lynn makes Sandra play Scrabbles with Françoise and Michel. Late into the night, everyone is out stargazing. Sandra wants to turn in for the night, and Lynn hopes to share her bed. Indoors, Sandra finds a text from Clément and reads through it. It starts as a recount of his day and time, then slowly switches into a detailed love letter on how much he misses every part of her, how much he longs to be with her yet again. Sandra and Lynn return home, meaning the lovebirds can resume their course. Clément stealths in after Sandra has tucked Lynn in for the night. It's a clear relief to be in each other's arms. Georg is getting transferred to a different hospital after he wandered off again, and both a doctor and social worker had to intervene, according to Françoise. The nurse mentions to Sandra that Georg has been an easy and memorable patient, and she's quite lucky to have him as a father. In the new hospital, Georg will have to share a room with a woman who's so bedridden that Françoise initially confuses her to have passed on. The doctor calls the family in to take in Georg's details. Françoise relays that Georg is suffering from Benson syndrome, and it first started when he couldn't make sense of words even though his eyesight was still intact. It's deteriorated so badly that he's now handicapped. In his better years, he was a philosophy lecturer, and he still hasn't fully come to terms with his disease, still looking for ways to stay in touch with work. Sandra is curious to know how the disease ends a patient, and the doctor divulges that with time the patient becomes bedridden and just passes on from there. The nurse interrupts to let them know that there's a different room they can put Georg in. Françoise is relieved. Clément comes over to Sandra's with news that their affair is in the open. He confessed to Valérie, and she threw him out. They told their son Daddy was going to work for a few days, hence him leaving. He doesn't have plans of where he'll stay in the long run, but what matters is that he's with Sandra now. Sandra crawls into his lap and offers her room. Lynn leaves her room at some point because she wants mommy time. She's receptive when she finds Clément is sleeping over. Over breakfast, Lynn and Clément get to know themselves better. She's studying planets at school, and he's a cosmochemist. He explains what that is and what it entails, while she in return recites all the planets she knows. Sandra goes to see Georg and patiently listens to him ramble about wanting to sleep. It's quite early, but he insists he's ready to be in bed, likening it to a short film he'll partake in, promising to be no bother afterward. Lynn and Clément are bonding over games. Sandra stirs awake and finds Clément missing from his side of the bed. She sees him seated in the dining area, idle but restless. He couldn't fall asleep. On her way to school, Lynn wants to know who Clément is. Sandra addresses him as her friend. He was first a friend of her dad's. Lynn knows Clément is more than a friend, so Sandra doesn't deny it or want her to overthink it. Sandra returns home and sees Clément with a torn look. He wants to make amends with his family, not having the heart to leave them for someone else. Sandra is heartbroken, and Clément points out that his being married was a clear red flag. She also feels like a victim in this love story, voicing that what they've shared meant a lot to her. He claims it's the same for him, but ultimately his decision is made. He picks up his bag and leaves. Sandra sucks it up and resumes work. She takes Lynn to go see a movie, and mother and daughter have a mild quarrel over taste in movies. Lynn gets upset that Sandra doesn't appreciate her movie and doesn't want her mother holding her hand on their walk home. Sandra goes to see Georg. He needs to use the restroom, so she goes to call a nurse. The nurse comes and proposes that Sandra could assist her father with a change. It's a hard step for Sandra to take because she's embarrassed. The nurse divulges she has parents too that are ill, and she assists them when they need to use the bathroom. She goes on to say that Sandra should consider learning as a way to bond better with her father in the limited time he has left. Sandra runs into Françoise on her way out. Over coffee, Françoise elucidates that Georg needs to be moved to a private home till they can sort things out. She urges Sandra and Eloise to check out a home in Courbevoie. The sisters check out the place and decide their father can't stay there. On the bus ride home, Sandra receives a text from Clément expressing that he misses her a lot. Sandra doesn't respond to the text, but she does smile at it, getting lost in thoughts. After a moment's thought, after fighting back tears, she decides to reply with an "I love you." Sandra reunites with Clément at a restaurant. They lock eyes first, then lips. When they pull apart, he lets her know it's been difficult trying to move on. Even his wife senses it but doesn't address it. They go back to her apartment, make love, and then lie together, lingering in the aftermath. Sandra takes Lynn to Esther's house. Esther is one of Georg's former students, the same one that wanted to email him earlier in the movie. Sandra and Lynn get to meet Esther's parents, then they get to arrange Georg's books in the library. Esther assures that they have access to the books anytime, as it's very much still theirs. Sandra is just happy that the books are being put to good use. She tells Lynn that she relates more with Georg's books than Georg himself, because the person at the nursing home is a shadow of what was. Lynn knows he didn't write the books, but Sandra clarifies the sentiments still hold because he chose them for his library. Elodie brought in a stereo, so Sandra tuned in some music for her father. At some point, the song, in his words, is too laden, and Sandra offers to change it to something more upbeat. He, however, prefers no music at all. Sandra turns it off and offers to take him on a walk on the terrace. Georg agrees to this. The walk doesn't last for long. Georg asks about Layla, and is glad to hear she visited him recently. Back in his room, he relays Layla's matters to him. He can't reckon who else matters. Sandra meets with Clément at a restaurant where she discusses the toll her father's illness is having both on her and on him. She hates to see him suffer, and Clément can only hope that he's losing consciousness of not just who he is, but the suffering he's going through. Sandra talks about the future on their walk back. Françoise had mentioned Georg's disease isn't hereditary, but Sandra doesn't believe her and has been too scared to check for answers online. She wants Clément to promise her, in the improbable case that they're together many years from now, that he'll euthanize her if the disease happens to her. He'll act fast before the symptoms take proper hold. It starts as a joke, but she soon shows she's serious. Clément calms her, promising that he'll honor her wish, but would rather they discuss something else. He just wants them to enjoy the years they have left. Sandra is at work when she gets a call from Clément, stating that he has some complications and won't be able to see her that weekend. She goes on to mess up the translation for one of the professors, because she wasn't paying attention. Clément shows up at Sandra's house, but she's cold. He has just an hour with her, and is up for spending it on an outing, rather than making love. He infers that since she's being cold, sex would only make her jump to conclusions about his intentions. She jumps regardless, referring to herself as an abandoned mistress. She straddles him, wanting to take foul play literally, but he warns her with a giggle. Whatever hostility she has, suddenly dissipated. Sandra and Eloise moved their father out of his current home to a new one. It was a long waiting list, but a spot finally opened. Layla shows up at Georg's new home, and he's very excited to have her. The daughters excuse the lovebirds. Sandra and Lynn join Clément at the park. Lynn is still receptive to Clément, and both Clément and Sandra display affection freely in her presence. He takes them rowing on a canoe, from one end of the lake to the other. While Lynn is off playing around a tree with some other kids, Sandra and Clément sit close together on the grass. He spots a family that knows his, and that's Sandra's cue to gather a resistant Lynn so they can leave. Back at her apartment, Sandra is curious if Clément is still intimate with his wife. She gathers that he is, and he excuses that they share the same room and have been married for years. It's only inevitable. She decides their relationship no longer makes sense and ends it. He agrees, but assures he'll come back for her once he properly breaks up with Valerie. She has to believe him because he loves her. Sandra just wants him gone. Sandra gets called to Lynn's school. The teacher reports that Lynn has been limping for 3 days now. Sandra takes Lynn to a pediatrician, and the doctor concludes on growth pain, prescribing some pills for it. In her absence, he informs Sandra that Lynn could win an Oscar award in the nearest future. The kid is just looking for a break from school, and the best Sandra can do is play along. Lynn notices Clément has been a no-show and asks her mother if she's fighting with him. Sandra explains they're on time out, but she hopes things sort themselves for their good. Françoise is on grandma duties. She and Lynn are going to see Frozen 2. Françoise relays she saw Georg, and he no longer recognizes her. Sandra fears she's next. Sandra discovers her father's journal recounting how his disease came to be. The words written in the journal play on, as Sandra continues her daily routine. It was hard for Georg to lose control of his life and his daily activities. The disease took what was dearest to him, reading. Still, He wanted some sort of victory over the disease and sought to keep writing against the degeneration of both his mind and sight. It's Christmas time, and the family is gathered at Francoise's place to celebrate. The Christmas tree has no gifts under it yet, so Eloise ushers the children into the study and closes the curtains because that's the only way Santa will visit, when they're out of sight. The adults put the presents and put on a show, making it seem like Santa did come. When Eloise releases them, the gifts are waiting under the tree. They gather for dinner and Sandra brings up Georg's pending autobiography. He talked about it, but never got around it. It was supposed to address his life in Vienna and his father's Sandra reads to her father. When she's leaving, he starts wandering, calling out to Layla. Sandra doesn't even bother to stop him. On the bus home, Sandra sees Clément's missed calls. She calls back, and when she gets home, she finds him waiting for her. She had her doubts, but he's proved her wrong. Sandra takes Lynn and Clément to see Georg. He's been at this new place for 6 months now. A nurse invites them for a recital downstairs. Patients and staff sing together. Sandra gets overwhelmed, Clément notices, and they bid Georg goodbye so they can leave. They go to Montmartre, where Clément tests Lynn's geography skills. She's able to identify some of the landmarks she sees, and Clément urges her to check for her house as well, because the spot offers a vast and panoramic view of the city. To any onlooker, they're a happy family.